Welcome to Homeschool is a Work of Heart. I'm Melissa Webb, and after years in the classroom and years homeschooling and supporting those in home education, and even more years creating curriculum for families like yours, I have learned this. Homeschooling isn't about perfection. It is about purpose. And this podcast is here to encourage you, to guide you, and to remind you that what you're doing truly matters. Are you ready to get started? Let's go. Well, hey there, homeschoolers. Welcome back to Homeschool is a Work of Heart. Another wonderful review came in. Again, I just want to thank everybody for taking the time to leave a review. And if right now you're thinking, I keep meaning to do that, I highly recommend you pause this right now. And on your phone, scroll down. You should see the review space where you can leave a number of stars. And right below there, it says write a review. And right now, you could just do it. Just do it. Get it done. I would love it and appreciate it so much. So a couple of days ago, my husband came home with a small box of ladybugs that he had picked up at Armstrong Gardens. And I love getting ladybugs. I wish that they all just arrived on their own. I do understand they do that in some parts of the country, but not here. So there's been several times that we have done this. We've just purchased a small box of them, and then we bring them home and we put them out at dusk. We spritz some water on the plants so that then they have something to drink, and hopefully they stick around for a while, because I don't know if you know this, but a single ladybug can eat up to 50 aphids a day. That's really helpful in a garden. I have rose bushes, and aphids love my rose bushes. But when I can release ladybugs into our garden, it's like I've just hired a natural, chemical-free pest control team. So yes, now I have a tiny ladybug army to protect my plants. I'm so happy about it. Which ladybugs, of course, always remind me of our son Adam. I can picture him still kneeling by our sprouting carrots in our little garden when he was maybe 2.5 years old. And he was really sad because he had found this little ladybug. And I told him that we were packing up to spend the day with Grandma and Grandpa. And he had asked if he could bring his new friend. And I was like, oh no, what did he find? And he just held out his hand. It was just this tiny little red ladybug. And he had found it. We had already talked a little bit how they protect our garden. So I did tell him, like, we need to leave the ladybug here. It's her job to protect the garden. And I said, hopefully we're going to see it tomorrow. And when we got in the car, he kept asking questions. But how are we going to know if it's the same one that I was playing with today? And it was all from that this storyline for my children's book began. If you don't already know it, by the way, I should probably say I have authored a children's book called How the Ladybug Got Her Spots. It was published by Covenant Books Incorporated back in 2019. And I try to remember to promote it every spring because it's just such a great piece of any thematic learning unit that you may be doing, especially if you're doing it around ladybugs. So I remember sitting in the car and I had grabbed a napkin from Greg's glove box. He keeps napkins in there. And so I remember writing out the first version of this book idea. And it obviously took a while before I got it published. It kind of went on the back burner. But I did love the story. At the time, I had been teaching kindergarten. I had been up in the upper grades, 4th and 5th grade. I'd come down to kindergarten. We had been studying the life cycles of ladybugs. And so everything, we were learning about its anatomy and its habitat and the food preferences. So all of that was top of mind. And with my teacher brain, I just kind of started this book idea that I thought would be a perfect thematic unit study resource. As well, when I was teaching the upper grades, one of the narrative genres that I would teach students to write was the pourquoi. And a pourquoi just is French for why. And why stories are really fun for kids to come up with short stories that explain things in nature. So again, total teacher brain here. I'm like, oh, this is going to be great for upper elementary teachers. They're going to love it because it's an example of a pourquoi. And then younger kids that are doing Ladybug units, they're going to love it. So all that to say, I felt like this was a perfect week, now that we're in spring, to add an exclamation point right here and remind you that a simple storybook can cover reading, of course, but it can also and should also cover things like science, math, writing, art, like all the subjects. Not only will your child enjoy the learning more, studies show that it helps with retention of what our kids are learning because it's all connected. And I get it. Many parent educators feel like they need to do separate lessons for everything. But I'm here to encourage you to think differently because I believe the opposite is true. The more I can teach thematically, the better. I love that. One good story, my friend, can multiply your child's learning. So sure, it could be a storybook, picture book, absolutely. But it could also be a good novel. We just put out this year our first novel unit for the Cricket in Times Square. So whether you want the storybook version, the picture book I have of how the Ladybug got her spots, or maybe you're interested in a novel, we have the Cricket in Times Square. We're coming out with our second one this summer. But we just fully embrace thematic learning because whatever type of reading you're doing, when you build a simple unit around that book, you are not adding work. You're multiplying learning for your kiddos. And that's really important. A lot of homeschool parents tell me that they love the idea of a thematic novel unit, but they already feel stretched. They have reading to do here, then they have a science unit they're doing over there, and then writing's coming from somewhere else. And it just feels like constantly switching gears, and it just doesn't leave any room for something kind of cohesive and thematic. And I do get that, but it doesn't have to be that way, and we can always start small. So I really hope that this week's podcast encourages you to just try it. Just start small. Children learn more through thematic units, and they learn through the connections they're going to make between characters to maybe moments in history, science or math crossovers, music, art of any time period. I don't know if you've ever used history pockets. When our boys were younger, those were very popular, and I know you can still get them out on Rainbow Resource, but they were not expensive. I want to say they were, $10-ish. They're probably a couple dollars more now, but history pockets were great. We did one on like a moving out west theme. We did colonial America. We did ancient Rome, and it was just that. It was pulling history into all of the other subject matters, and it made it so interesting, and it kept it going on for a good amount of time. And I tell you, it just stuck with the boys. There's also, what's the curriculum? Moving Beyond the Pages is another one that takes novel units, and then again, they tie it in. So there are a lot of things. You don't have to start from scratch. You can, by all means, you can, but there's just so much goodness out there. And if you haven't done a thematic lesson yet this year, whether you have an elementary child, a middle school child, they love them. They do. I promise you, you can make it so interesting. Throw in a field trip as well. And it just becomes a really fun 6-week, 8-week project that you're doing together It's amazing. It's really amazing. And there is so much strong educational research behind thematic lessons, whether they call it thematic learning, integrated learning is another term I've heard people use. The idea is simple. Your goal is to connect subjects. Children will understand better, they'll remember more when reading is connected to science, and then maybe science connects to some form of writing. Learning sticks. And you know what else? I have seen motivation increase. It just makes it more fun. And we all know when a child is interested, everything does seem to get easier, don't you think? I mean, at least that's been my experience. So instead of adding more to your plate, I really want you to think of a thematic lesson as a way to simplify what you're doing in a way that's going to encompass a whole lot through one theme. And you can go from taking just one isolated topic and just let it branch out into multiple areas. And I'll give you a really simple example. I'll use my Ladybug book as the catalyst. I know, a shameless plug, I know. But like I told you, I try to do this every spring. Let everybody know, hey, I wrote a children's book, and I think you might find it very fun and entertaining. So let's just say you're studying ladybugs this spring. And whether you have elementary or those middle schoolers, they can all find this interesting if you go deep enough, depending on their interest level. Obviously, younger kids, you're going to just stay kind of surfacey, but older kids, you could really go deep with this. You could start and you could research ladybugs, obviously read some stories about ladybugs, learn about their anatomy, the actual terms of their body parts, their habits, their habitats. You could draw one, you could paint one, you could do an anatomical sketch in a science notebook. I mean, I'm just picturing this right now. Like, you go on a hike, it's spring, it's a beautiful time to hike. You take lunch, you stop along the way. At some point, everybody sits down on a log. You look around, maybe there's a ladybug, maybe there's a grasshopper, maybe there's an ant, whatever, a bird, and you sketch. You just take quiet time, listen to nature, have this peaceful moment. Oh, it just sounds so lovely to me. With this book, being a pourquoi, you could even write your own pourquoi, your own why story about a different animal or a different insect, something of your own choosing. So that's reading, that's science, that's art, that's right. It's all starting from one point, ladybugs. And it just feels so cohesive. It just makes sense to a child's mind. It's how they think. And we did this countless of times when we were homeschooling. I know Derek still remembers his big squirrel unit. He was just so interested in how many different kind of squirrels there could be. I'm like, let's do a squirrel unit. I had no idea where we were going to go with it. I really didn't. But I let the learning lead us. And we just started with something of interest. And then we went with it. We let his interest lead the way. I suppose this could also be a somewhat structured form of how I would interpret unschooling. You may have heard of unschooling. There's different philosophies around it. I liked this part. When I would say, what should we study next in science? I would hand over a science book and I'd say, go to any page you want. And that's going to lead us. And then we're going to go find other resources. So we'd often see something in that book or something in nature. A praying mantis caught their attention at one point. Snakes, of course. Coyotes. Out where we live, there's the Lusweno nation of Native Americans. And you can actually hike out to the adobes. So there's so much history in that. We did Native American art. We learned specifically about that nation of tribes. It was just so much fun. I loved this part of homeschooling most of all because it just led to creativity. They had this huge piece of directing what we were going to do. That was very empowering. So keep it in mind. Okay, I'm going to go back to now pretending that your child has shown an interest in ladybugs. So this is actually one of the reasons I did write the book. As I mentioned, I knew it would be a thematic gem. Like I mentioned, first off, it's a pourquoi. That's the traditional why story, the kind that explains something in nature but in a creative way. Think of why the elephant has a trunk, or why giraffes have long necks, why stars are in the night sky. You could go so many ways with this. And that's another great way to tie into why did people tell pourquoi stories, and maybe go look back at some history of Native Americans who explained different things. There are so many great stories out there. There are some really great African pourquois you might want to look into as well. I could go on a whole other direction with that, but let me come on back to this. So again, you want to pick things that are going to tie into a creative piece, but then also include other real details like the ladybug anatomy and the habits, the other things that I mentioned. So while your child is enjoying the story, for sure, as the kind of the catalyst, they're also going to learn so much more. It's just the easiest way I know of to create a starting point for a full unit. And ladybugs in springtime go hand in hand, so I really hope you consider it. As well, I have a 23-page digital thematic lesson plan. It's over on Teachers Pay Teachers. I'll link to it in the show notes. I'll link to my book in the show notes. I'll give you all the things. And every single subject you can imagine ties into my book in that 23-page thematic lesson plan. Even PE. There are even games that I have in there for ladybugs. So I am going to read a couple of pages of my book so you can kind of get the idea, the flow of it. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'll let you enjoy the story on your own, but you can see how I wrote it. In a large autumn garden, like one seen in books, a young boy named Ted explored creeks and nooks. He found an orange leaf that lay on the ground, its color and shape like none could be found. Yet the leaf by itself was not an unusual thing. It was the little red spot that he found intriguing. When this little red spot actually moved just a bit, Ted moved a tad closer. Had he imagined it? His eyes did not blink. He just watched with great care as 6 spindly legs quickly moved here to there. So you can see it's in a rhyming pose, so you could even teach rhyming off of a book like this. Again, just kind of seeing where the story takes you. I think that's really important. From just that little part that I read, I'm hoping you can imagine where it could go. Your kids could predict, what do you think's going to happen? They could discuss what parts of this book are realistic fiction versus that's completely fictional. You could talk about the parts of a ladybug. I mentioned the 6 spindly legs. They have 6 legs. I even go in and talk about their hard red shell called the elytra and how there are wings tucked underneath. It goes deep. It really does. Then you could go look for ladybugs, go on a ladybug hunt. You could draw one, watercolor one. Like I said, you could have your children write their own why story, or you could write a pourquoi together. That would be fun. And that's the beauty. That is certainly the beauty of starting any learning with a story. It opens the door to so much possibility. And I hope you are feeling so inspired. I hope you're just thinking right now, wow, we just read a story. I see a direction we can go with this now. That would be amazing. I want you to love what you're doing, and I want your kids to love the learning too. Pulling stories into all of it is just a beautiful way to do that. So just keep that in mind. If you're looking for a simple way to make your spring lessons bloom, this is such an easy place to start. And currently, I am sending out personalized signed copies. I will mail it to you, the book. I have hardback and I have paperback versions. Shipping is included as long as it's within the United States. and I would love to send one your way. That would be so amazing. Absolutely. So you can check that out in the show notes, or you can go to my website, which is writeonweb.com. That's WRITEONWEBB, two B's like my last name, .com, and learn more there. I do hope that the next book you pick up, whatever that may be, I hope it inspires you. I hope it inspires your brain to go beyond the pages in whatever way the wind may take you. But embrace learning, keep it fun, and let those stories inspire your next study. Right on. And that's it for today. Thank you so much for joining me. And hey, if you are feeling stretched thin and you would love some support with teaching writing, I offer programs designed to make that part of homeschooling easier and more enjoyable for both you and your child. I also have free resources on my website, so please be sure to check those things out and subscribe to the podcast. You do not have to do this alone. Right on.